Welcome to California in Focus. I'm your host, Keegan Kernodle. Joining me today is the Center Square's California reporter, Kenneth Schrupp. And today we are talking about California running on 67% clean energy. However, prices being double the national average. Kenneth, can you get into this for us?
Yeah, Keegan. So the energy in California, well, 67% of it in 2023 was quote unquote clean energy. That's something Governor Newsom is very proud to report on. What he maybe neglected to note was that energy prices for the state's three largest electricity providers averaged 36.6 cents per hour. That is more than double the national average of 17.5 cents per kilowatt hour. Newsom's statement really focused on the national government starting to reduce funding for quote unquote clean energy projects. Newsom said, as the federal government turns its back on innovation and common sense, California is making our clean energy future reality. The world's fourth largest economy is running on 2/3 clean power, the largest economy on the planet to achieve this milestone. So California's Republican legislators had a interesting response to Newsom's statement. They said, Gavin Newsom's energy victory lap skips the key detail. Californians pay some of the highest electricity rates in America. He won't even say affordability because he can't defend the cost. This is backed up by a lot of data from the Public Advocate's Office at the California Public Utilities Commission. The CPUC regulates energy in the state. It says the PAO's office says that the rates for the state's three largest utilities, that's Pacific Gas and Electric, San Diego Gas and Electric, and Southern California Edison, have risen 121%, 88%, and 80% since 2014, which unsurprisingly has significantly outpaced inflation. And the main reasons for this are higher electricity use and higher electricity rates. And we have more data and reports on why electricity rates are rising. Two of the main factors are wildfire liabilities for utilities. Sometimes their equipment is found to be involved in wildfires. It's unfortunate that this happens. It's also not clear why it's not, often the government's responsibility to do more brush clearance in these areas where these power lines are going through. I understand that the power companies do often own the land under their power lines and that there's a responsibility for them to do some management there. But the areas surrounding the power lines and power equipment, very often that is state or federal land. I don't know if we're seeing enough brush clearance on that, as we've covered earlier here. Another interesting component of this, though, is something called the net metering in California. Net metering is this program where people who have these solar panels on their roofs are paid for the value of the energy they produce at sort of a retail price. There are a few different programs. But the problem is that this energy generated during the day is a very low value to the grid because there is so much solar now. So at nighttime, when there is no more solar, we have to use fossil fuel, battery power, or even import power from other states that's running on something like coal. If I'm correct, I do believe that California even operates a coal plant in another state to provide virtual power to California. Emissions and pollution aren't real if they're not happening here. The California Public Utility Commission says that this solar metering program is pretty much a subsidy to wealthy owners of property who can afford to install solar panels on property they own that's paid for by people who are just paying normal electricity rates, but also who don't benefit from the subsidized electricity rates for very low income people. So the middle class is having to spend an estimated $6.5 billion on these transfer payments to the people who are wealthy enough to have solar. So the California Public Utility Commission has looked at the cost of the solar metering program. It says it's going to cost customers without solar an estimated $6.5 billion, or at least that was their estimate for 2024. This figure has doubled from 2021 when it was about half that. And what their research also found was that 15% of the average non-solar household's bill goes towards rooftop solar payments to the property owners, generally wealthier homeowners, who can afford to install these systems or even have the authority to install these systems. Because if you live in a condo, even if you own the condo, you generally don't have the right to install the solar on your roof. And this also ignores the fact that people who are much lower income also get subsidized, sometimes even nearly free energy because of their income. So you have a very limited bandwidth of people who, can't afford a house, but also don't qualify for energy bill assistance, who are paying for this entire project.
Well, thank you, Kenneth, for getting into this with us. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com. And thanks for joining California in Focus.